Good evening. I'm Dharmendra Gordon, and this is Vegan Zenergy Awakening number 31. Welcome to all of you that are here participating live and to those of you that will be watching later. I invite everybody now to just kind of take a moment to find yourself where you're at in your space right now and just be aware of your presence in your body. And whatever you're sensing, whatever you're picking up, whatever sounds are around. If your eyes are open, whatever you're seeing. If you're moving, just be aware that you're moving. And just tap into your mind for a moment and just notice what it's doing, whatever thoughts and preoccupations or visual or words or anything. And just kind of let go of any engagement with that, because your mind will be there when we're done. When we get done with the meeting tonight, it'll be right there waiting for you again. So you can just let it take a little vacation for now. You can even say, go ahead, have a vacation. You haven't had a vacation in such a long time. And then as we allow the energy to move down into the heart, just sort of feel into your heart your connection with all living beings, those that are close to you, physically and relationally, as well as those in various circles that you connect into. Just allow your heart to embrace all of that, to embrace all the living beings you connect with, including all the animals and every form of life. Just sort of breathe with that for a moment. And then finally just allow your awareness and your energy to drop down into your belly and just sort of tap into the universal pulse of existence, and just feel yourself being held in that space of existence as yourself, and that you are totally supported and loved as you are. As I tell a little story about the 20th Life Code, our theme for the evening. The 20th Life Code is all about giving voice to what is occurring in your immediate and direct experience according to the depth of your awareness and your capacity to discern what is actually taking place as it is unfolding moment to moment. At the physical level, the body-mind registers the basic elements of our experience through our sensory channels as the common ground of our collectively agreed upon consensus reality. At the astral level, emotional content is experienced as a result of the combination of our mental picturing and our volitional intent. And this combination is literally projected out into our environment, where it can be felt by any sentient being. And whole systems of physiognomy have been developed as a result of data collected, which focuses at this level of experience. At the mental level, we encounter the world of symbols that are the way we organize patterns into representations that make sense to us based on the results arising from the effect volition has when it harmonizes with the right kind of energetic vibration that supports its expression. In the world of causation, there's a wide range of experience that can occur when energy is available for the manifestation of spirit, which is another way of saying essence in this context. At the true spiritual or Buddhic level, there arises out of a deep centering the possibility of healing the split and re-establishing the balance between the conscious and unconscious tendencies in man, when the essential self is given space to find and express its unique movement in the world through some creative medium. At the atmic, which is also called the cosmic level, man begins to discover that there are many movements in his life that are mirroring the greater movements of the universe of which he is a part, through the fractal nature of existence and its holographic dance of sameness throughout its multidimensional continuum of consciousness experience. And all of this can be seen as the Leela, or grand play of the ancient inexhaustible source, and its desire to know itself, which we, as humans, can experience directly on our microcosmic scale through our monadic, also known as nirvanic body. This is also the essence of the famous treatise by the Taoist master Lao Tzu, known as the Tao Te Ching, wherein the true and highest virtue is to be in complete harmony with the Tao. Hence, the ability to be aware and awake in the present moment implies many levels and layers of possibilities that open up to include a greater density of meaningful experience as our awareness grows and develops. At the shadow level of this life code, being in the now only skims the surface of reality through the information received through the five senses. It is present to the appearance level of phenomena. It is as if everything has been reduced to the status of an object, and that status is held rigidly in place by a deep fear that functions on the surface, by doing everything to maintain the illusion of control. And the reason being is that then this being, limited to such a perceptual stance, lives in a static world where everything is dependent upon the way they choose to interact with it. At least that is the way they see and relate to everything they encounter in their environment. Everything observable at this level is relegated to a few highly generalized categories for classifying things encountered in the world. In this way, such a being need only remain present at the most rudimentary level of his existence. Even emotional signals are just taken as a way to orient to whatever is happening around one in such a way so as to continue the maintaining of the illusion of control. And their mental faculties, for the most part, are given over to keeping track of those types of situations where they were able to promote their illusion of control the easiest. And they also dedicate a good portion of their memory to the storing of the memories of these types of experiences. They tend to create environments around them that support this way of thinking, speaking, and acting, and they consistently test those around them to make sure very little variation from this type of script occurs. This level of being present to the world is limited to what the five senses are capable of perceiving and communicating, and all mental activity is also not allowed to wander outside of this boundary. As we enter into the gift level of this life code, a new element enters the field of observable phenomena, and that is the presence of the one who is in the now and perceiving all of this, the witness, and that brings up the term self-remembering, and also the existence of a subject that is not only capable of all that perceiving, but also capable of realizing that they are the ones doing that perceiving as the source of that perceiving. The entry of a witnessing subject changes the whole living experience from one populated by bodies and objects with predictable ways of being, and thus easy to manipulate, to a world of beings that can grow and change in unique ways, thus adding to the incredible richness and diversity of life on this planet. Such a being will of necessity have to develop a much more profound and user-friendly skill set to truly be present to the world of living creatures of which they are a part, than their fellow shadow dweller. As a witnessing presence, slowly everything starts to take on the flavor of essential experience. It begins to be imbued with the signature of innate intelligence as the patterns of interconnectedness start to reveal themselves in myriads of ways, increasingly revealing new and unsuspected possibilities for relationship. The world of subjects is full of surprises, as new relationships are formed out of the unique patterns created by evolving consciousnesses coming together with creative intent in the unfolding of potential for the enactment of mutually beneficial exchanges of substances. As one becomes more fluent with the position of witnessing, the center of gravity of one's existential presence shifts from the artificial construction of a personality that is centered in egoic experience to the natural grounding that arises from the heart-centered experience of the essential self. As this experience deepens, the ability to perceive the essential reality behind appearances becomes increasingly more available to all of one's sensory capacities, as if each of one's senses were, and in fact they are, developing a multidimensional array of aspects for experiencing highly refined distinctions in the total field of possibilities arising as one's present moment. And simultaneously with this increased capacity to differentiate comes the ability to integrate all this information in ways that make sense, that wouldn't have even seemed imaginable, let alone possible in the past or at the level of the shadow. As we enter the realm of the Siddha, another threshold is crossed, as we move from self-remembering to absolute witnessing. At a certain point in remembering that we are the perceiver of all that we perceive, and awareness initiates in us the process of realizing the presence of that which is the source of and out of which this witnessing presence arises. At first, we experience a profound silence and an imperturbable stillness through which there is sensed an unfathomable depth of awareness coupled with a pure and pristine clarity, and out of which there is spontaneously arising an indescribable movement of pure freedom that feels like what can only be described as undiluted ecstatic intensity. As we now realize we are in communion with the ancient and inexhaustible source of all and everything, and out of which flows into all directions the intrinsic awareness wisdom of the universal life force. After a moment, it is realized that we are one with and have never actually been separate from at any time this sheer magnificence of truth, beauty, and goodness, as we are in reality an actual focus and locus of the manifestation of this all-encompassing divine nature that is the never-ending continuous originator of all that is newly arising. We are the local representative of this original source in our world and on our scale, as the direct and personal experience of the Siddha of this life code, through the absolute witnessing of this divine presence unraveling itself through us and as us, forevermore. And as we learn to attune to this source, gradually we awaken to the mystery of the creative pulse, spontaneously flowering of itself moment to moment, always fresh, always new, always now, always us, and in perfect synchronicity with everything in existence, where the boundaries of the possible are constantly being transcended as the impossible becomes possible, with every breath that existence takes through us. Sometimes the simplest things express the most profound realities. So, we begin this evening with the shadow of external observing. And for me, what that means is basically a state where I guess you could say I'm holding on to the world of appearances, the way things appear, and I'm basing. It's very deeply conditioned thing in us from a very young age because we are dependent on others for our material existence. So it's very drilled into us at a very young age that if we want to feel safe and secure, there are certain rules and most of the time expressed under a lot of pressure. Certain rules that we are obliged to follow in order to continue to experience this safety and security. So it tends to, at times, easily draw me into a state of holding on to appearances and only seeing things at the surface, and anything else that is occurring is kind of taken into a generalized context that's sort of like background for whatever I'm, the five senses: seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and tasting. And although that is can be, especially when you're in nature, a beautiful experience, in those times when it's definitely a fear based state where you find, or I find myself, when there are times when I'm concerned, where I let my mind is drifting off into, what's happening in the world right now? Where's it all going? Will we have what we need to survive? Will people be okay? Will my granddaughter grow up? What kind of a world will they grow up in? And when all of that kind of happens, then what I notice in my environment and the way I perceive my environment is very limited. It's very much limited to the five senses, and I'm not able to see any deeper than that. And I realize as I tap into that it has a lot to do with that there's certain tension patterns in my body, and there's a certain very restricted breathing process that's going on that is kind of again like under a pressure, and it's not fully releasing or absorbing oxygen or releasing carbon dioxide in the way it should. And so that usually, and it usually takes a while before I am able to catch that state and go, oh, wait a minute, and catch the thought that's pulling all of that kind of behavior into such a superficial way of experiencing my environment and the people around me. And I also realize in sharing all this that so much of what goes on for, especially the commercials on TV, they're always trying to pull you out into that superficial world in order to just limit the consciousness to one thing, buy this, or one thing, be attracted to that, or get our product here, or listen to what we have to say and what our opinion is about this. And so that's what happens. I notice when I get in that state, it's very one track. There's no real ability to absorb more than just one single focus. And even that, there's also the ability to hold my attention is limited to seconds rather than a bigger time scale. So I'm using, as always, myself as an example to actually peer into what is the shadow and start to open up the shadow and realize that also when I do that, I'm not very aware of what's going on around me in the world and what's going on in ways that are so many different ways that are pertinent that connect us all together, but none of that is happening at the shadow, because at the shadow, it's only as far as you can see or hear or touch or taste or smell. And that's it. That's the limit. There's no greater depth. There's no connectedness yet. Because everything on the surface is just kind of like, flat land. It's desolate, like a desert. There's no real life to it. So those are just some of the qualities that, if you can call them qualities, limitations, whatever, that I experience when I tap into a very superficially oriented um, way of being in the now. Because this gate, this life code we're opening today is all about it. It's the genetic possibility of what allows us to be present in the now. And so we're starting at the very tip of the iceberg. What is the most attenuated experience of attention when we're in the now? We're in the now anyway. Doesn't matter. We're not somewhere else. This isn't a life code that supports memory or future visioning. It supports holding yourself in the position of being here. And it also supports the voice that can express that. I'm here now, this is the room I'm in, et cetera, et cetera. But it's limited to the five senses. So that's as much as I'll say to begin to open up how this life code functions at the shadow level for me.
I'll go. I definitely connect with what you're saying, Dharmendra. And I know for me, this like superficiality, this superficiality that seems to show up in my life and that I see and have to deal with, it's like there's different layers to it. Because sometimes I feel like I see my place in the world through a superficial lens that isn't necessarily my own. Maybe it was like handed down to me through my culture or my family, and so I can. It's like there's these different lenses that I can put on to see the world through different superficial lenses, and sometimes it's easy to take the standard narrative lens and I put that on, and then it feels like then when I look at my life and then the lives of all these people who are doing work that I really like respect and care about through the main narrative lens, it looks like that just doesn't make any sense. It's like what people are trying to do and accomplish. It just, I don't know. It's like, yeah, there's like nothing to it. It's just like, it's like a very two-dimensional like judgment. It's like the way I feel in the shadow is like it's like, I feel like it's the definition of like judging a book by its cover or something. And yeah, I think that, yeah, it just feels like there's no room to grow. It's very like constricting or restrictive. I know I've caught myself several times in the shadow recently where I feel like I'm judging myself or comparing myself to some sort of superficial standard. And then when I catch myself, it's that same thing you were talking about, how all of a sudden I realized I wasn't breathing as deeply as I ought to be. And then there's a flood of oxygen into my blood, and all of a sudden it's just this realization, oh, when I'm living in that superficial space, you're like only like half alive. It's like you go into this weird space of where things don't take on any sort of real life like animation. Yeah, which is kind of how I like how I feel about a lot of these superficial things that we're told and encouraged to participate in. It's like once they actually enter into your life, maybe it's a house or a new car, you realize that like a lot of them are inert. It's like us that is adding the life to these objects, these material objects, but they're sold to us to be like, oh, this is the source of the life and vitality in your life, and then they arrive to us and they're kind of like these two-dimensional experiences that only through our own like active enlivening will they add anything to our lives. But like we end up being the kind of catalyst or yeah, for those experiences. It's like they work through us, so they don't. I don't know. That's how I feel.
Thanks, Evan. I think you expressed that very well. No comment.
Hi, everyone. It's kind of like getting back on a bike again. I haven't been here for a while. I'm like, oh my God, how do I do this again? My experience is very different from 6 months ago if I had been having this conversation with all of you around the shadow of superficiality and seeing the world in very surface-like ways from the five senses. Because for the past 6 months, we've been in isolation and in deep meditation and contemplation. I like that word better, contemplation, and a deep connection with nature around us, because we haven't been in the city. We've been blessed to be on the island here. And really my conversations have been with the wind and the water and the animals and Jamin and myself and God. It's really increased my senses that are beyond my senses. And so things that used to matter to me just don't matter to me any longer. And what I'm interested in now is the truth, and whatever that is, but the truth of the here and now, and that connection with the life around me in the here and now. So I'm really not thinking forward too far or thinking behind, but just really practicing gratitude and being here and now. And that's taken a lot of pressure off because I'm not worried about things anymore. I just am in this flow, and it doesn't mean that things are easy, that there isn't necessarily material abundance, but what I'm finding is I just don't need that anymore. So I walk a lot. I'm not concerned about, how I look anymore. Like if my hair's, brushed or not brushed, or if I take, still wearing the same old green vest for the last 6 months. So my focus has changed. So I just wanted to share that because that's where I'm at with this. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. That was kind of like, I think you did a really good job of trying to respect and stay in the shadow, but still be truthful about your own experience. And I think you did well, because it's kind of like where the shadow starts to move into the gift, is that there's this sense of connectedness with, let's say, nature when you're walking or whatever. And it's just, but it's a simple presence that's present with the, whatever kind of environment you're in, the grass, the trees, the animals, whatever, the breeze, and all those kind of things, which is still the surface, but it's starting to shift into something deeper, because nature has this funny way of taking us to a different place when we really come into presence with it, but I'm not going to go there yet. I was wondering if Sarah had something she wanted to share on this, what we're talking about.
Well, kind of, but I didn't actually understand when you were reading the Siddha, or whatever you want to call it.
It's just Siddha, yeah, you got it right. Well, once we get to the Siddha, then maybe it'll make
What
more
are you guys
sense.
talking? What are you guys talking about at the beginning, though? Because I didn't really follow a pattern.
Oh, well, the pattern is always we go from the shadow, which is the fear-based experience of whatever life code we're working with for the week. And then once everybody's done that, then we shift into the gift, which is more about a heart spaced and more connected with the collective and life and animals and everything. We get to the Siddha, though, that's where we tune into the universal, and that's something that connects us with our source, however we experience. That's what a Siddha is.
Yeah, but what did you say the theme was that we're supposed to be talking about right now? That's
right.
Okay,
right.
I just can't hear very well recently.
My
hearing on my devices, something happened
gotcha.
where water got in something. I can't hear very well. Okay.
Got it. Okay,
yeah.
So it's superficial or surface level experience where it's like superficiality, or everything there's no depth to it. It's just you're here, you're present, because this life code allows us through our genetic attunement to be present to our environment, but there's no depth. So it's like everything's on the surface, like commercial land, when people, that kind of thing.
So I've been living in that world for a really long time, and I recently am trying to divest out of that, actually. And I got a wake-up call last week. I got an email about like top awarded business 12 years in a row or whatever, for my business in Atlanta that I sold. Well, I forwarded it over to the guy who bought my business, and he writes me back saying, yeah, we got evicted on March 21st because we had to close for COVID. Then we got evicted, and I said, wait a minute, what about you guys selling to the new owner? The new people that are supposed to buy that business. And it's a long story, but basically I'm in an earnout where they pay me every quarter. I get a paycheck. So I don't have like a W-2. I just have like check stubs because they owe me a certain amount of money. Well, I just come to find out last week that they're not going to pay me. They're just not going to pay me because they decided that since the business is closed and they're not going to reopen it, even though they have their own other business, that they're just not going to pay me. So they owe me like almost maybe $1,000. Yeah, 0, 0, 0. And some people will be like, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. It's like, I don't even want to hear anybody telling me they're sorry to hear it. It's just like, I've got to just basically reinvent my situation. And I'm just basically going to have to go get a job at wherever that I have to go get a job at. a grocery store, even though I'll never do that because I will not even sell, meat, dairy, or eggs. But I have been in a, like, I don't even care in a way because I'm just over it. And I'm not actually surprised. I'm just like, I feel like, what did I do? I'm trying to go back to, like, what did I do to somebody or something happened, because I believe in karma. So I'm going back to try to figure out, did I do something to somebody? Did I piss somebody off? Like, what did I do? Because this is, like, scary. And also, I've been really hoping that we do get to the Vegan World 2026 and that we're done, and or we're not on this planet anymore. At least me, I don't want to be here after 2026. I already made that decision. I don't care what anyone says. I've made that decision. I'm fine with it. I hate being here. I only get up every single day for my beagle because this world just doesn't work for me anymore the way it is. It's screwed up. It's messed up. And all of our freedoms are being taken away from. Everything that we worked so hard for is just being taken away from us. And if we don't want to wear a mask somewhere, we're selfish. That just doesn't make sense to me. The people that eat meat, dairy, and eggs, the ones that caused all this, are the ones that are now saying that we're selfish. It's just outrageous. And that's what I have to say for today.
Wow, that kind of was like a perfect summary of exactly what this shadow, that was it. Well said. I mean, what more can you say? That kind of sums it up. If we're really honest, probably for most of that kind of covers probably how most of us are feeling right now. Yeah, and all the surprises that keep coming up that are forcing us to have to change the way we've been living and thinking and feeling and yeah. Thank you for that, sir. That was definitely the whoosh, of the energy of the shadow of this life code. No question about it. Okay, so with that whoosh, we're going to magically shift into the gift aspect, which I mean, one way of saying it is self-assuredness, but to me, that's a result of what happens when you remember yourself. When you're present to your experience, not just looking out at everything and seeing everything around you and how it all relates and how the world works and all that out there, but when there's a connection inside you that is the one who's experiencing and perceiving all of that out there. So now there's a relationship going on. It's not just this sheer sense of identification with what's outside of us and forgetting ourselves when we go out into that observable world out there, but there's also a resonance with all of that and everything we contact out there through our senses within us. So we start to develop this inner ability and inner component of all our senses. We start to develop an inner seeing, an inner hearing, an inner feeling. And when I say an inner seeing, I don't mean imagining things. I mean, there's a way of perceiving things inwardly where you actually take in the energy of whatever it is you're seeing on the outside. And it's a form that comes into you like an energy field. It's not an imaginary thing that you're trying to like picture with a label to put on the thing you're seeing outside of you. It's more like you're taking it into you and absorbing its essence and its energy form, and you're feeling that within your aura. So that's another aspect of the gift aspect of this, is you start to develop a sensitivity around you of your aura, like arms reach all around you in every direction, above you, below you, and behind you. That's your aura. That's your energetic field, and everything that happens around you can be sensed and picked up by that auric energetic field. And when I say you, I mean me. So when I'm in my auric field and I'm sensitive there, I can pick up things that I would, and be sensitive to things in my environment, and I can tune into things visually or auditorily or even spatially in ways I would not be able to do if I was just identified and throwing myself out into what's around me, because what's inside me is fear and I don't want to feel fear. That's what the shadow does. But once we settle into our remembering that we're here, we are part of what's being observed, we're the observer, we're capable of also observing ourselves and remembering ourselves. And as we start to do that, and our breathing shifts, the minute I start to self-remember, then my breathing shifts, and I start to become present to my experience, and I start to slow down. Time starts to open up. It starts to dilate. I start to feel like I have more space to breathe. I have more space to think. I have more space to feel. I have more space to remember what I need to remember, whatever that might be in the moment, to connect with my environment. And then I have then it's like I start to shift and realize I have a choice that's different than the conditioning I received when I grew up about how I relate to any experience I'm encountering in the moment. And hence, if I just allow myself to experience what I'm encountering in the moment, and just allow whatever comes out of me spontaneously to be the response, I'm going to have a very different experience of any environment I go into, especially if I continue to do this and continue always to remember myself. And it doesn't mean it's always going to be perfect. There's times I'm going to walk into a room with others and I'm going to feel certain tensions. And those are going to impact me in a certain way. But if I remember myself, then instead of those tensions coming into my form and making me get tense and go into my shadow and only see what I like or don't like about the surface of that person that I'm getting tension from, instead, I remember myself. I allow their energy to be a signal to me about something that is a gift for me because they've given me some kind of energy. And that energy, when it comes into me and I start to connect with it, I actually can start to find its unique signature. Once I find that unique signature and I can let myself settle with that and breathe with it, I can literally mirror back to that person that same energy with a little bit more awareness and a little bit more remembrance of who I am and a little bit more consciousness. And and so what I find is being present and remembering myself, I can transform my experience. As I'm experiencing it with another person, so that my response to another person is the very same thing they're giving to me, I'm just adding my awareness to it. And then it changes the whole energy. And the person's going to feel that my response is sensitive to them and familiar to them because it's the very same energy that I took in from them. I've just kind of refined it a little bit by adding some awareness to it. So it's a little bit more clear, it's a little bit less foggy, it's a little bit more meaningful, and it's a little bit more experienceable in a comfortable way. It feels more like a kind of more of a loving or inviting or, supportive energy rather than a fearful, guarded, separating, divisive energy. But the thing is I allow myself to feel that energy as it comes in, whatever it is, whether it's fearful or divisive or whatever. But whatever that energy is, and once I bring it in, then I remember myself. I just go with it, and then it just becomes like something I can play with. It just becomes like an experiment, and I can go, oh, this is an interesting energy. Let me see what happens when I give it some space and let it move through me. Let me see what it's trying to tell me. Because so many times when people are out there and they're not present and they're identified with things out there, they do develop, and there's something that, maybe they need from that environment, but they're not getting it because of simply the way they're not present in their presence, in their being in the now. They're very on the surface. But there's something they're wanting from the environment, a sense of security or whatever it is, or excitement or adventure. But until maybe somebody steps into the space who's present, who's remembering themselves and can bring that quality into the space for them, and then think, oh, this is what I was looking for. And they may not even do it consciously, but because you're present and you're remembering yourself, you're providing the possibility for them to go, oh, this is what I was looking for in this space. Oh, perfect. And sometimes life is just that simple. It's not like it's always about figuring something out or getting something done. So much of the time, what we do in doing all of that is we forget to just be where we are while all that's happening. Because if we're not doing that, then we're missing. I'm missing the point if I'm not being there. And I definitely, many times when I get too much into the surface, then I get into rushing. That's my thing. I start rushing, and then I start missing the little notes. So what's happening is I'm tapping into my remembering. I'm also remembering other qualities of what happens when you get into a shadow space. In being in a present, in being present in the now, is you tend to miss it because you rush through it. I mean, that's what happens for me. So that's what I have to say so far about self-remembering.
Dharmender, I just have a question. When you talk about remembering yourself, what does that look like or feel like to you? Like if you were to guide someone into how to remember yourself, is that through your intention, et cetera, et cetera? Thank you.
Well, you're basically, let's say if I'm introducing you to self-remembering and you're sitting there and you're doing things, you just moved your hand and you're chewing on something and you're nodding your head, okay? Those are all observable things on the surface. So what I ask you to do now, while all those things are happening, is there a place in you that isn't involved in any of those things? That isn't that movement, that isn't anything going on with your mouth, that isn't listening to what I'm saying and trying to figure out, is there a place of stillness inside you that is simply present and aware through all of that? And what is that place? From what is that arising from? And that's how you start to tune into and become aware of this capacity of witnessing that you literally are. None of the things you experience, think about, feel, you're nothing. You really are just, we are just at the absolute level, and we'll get into that more and more at the Siddha. We are just a witness. That is our godliness, is the fact that we are an indefinable, unfathomable, indescribable witness that has no form, no localization, no place you can point to and go, it's that, or it's this quality. It transcends anything. It's the capacity to be present for anything. And so at the level of the heart space, where you're sharing intimate interaction with others, and you start to notice, maybe I'll start to notice myself talking to you. And I'll start to notice that, oh, Dharmender's talking right now, even though it's me talking. You know what I'm saying? That's a very good example of what self-remembering is. When you start to catch yourself and jump outside of it and just let yourself go on talking, you don't have to control it or anything. It knows how to do it all by itself, and you just let it go. And so there's an example, because I'm actually doing that. So that's a good example of self-remembering also. A couple different examples. So that's what it means.
So I had an experience recently that kind of reminded me of what, that was really beautifully described. So I really want to thank you for that. It was a conversation I was having with a friend around Black Lives Matter. And it was kind of a very emotional conversation, because this friend of mine basically said, and she's white, well, Black Lives Matter doesn't really, it's not important for me, because what I'm doing is focusing on Donald Trump and politics, and that's where I can be effective. And so we started having this conversation. And in the conversation, because I decided to not attach myself to trying to change her opinion or sway her in one way or another, I was witnessing myself, like telling her a story without attachment, but planting seeds for a new idea in her. But I wasn't even trying, it's hard to describe, because I was happening through me, but I wasn't attached to the outcome, and I wasn't really even thinking that I was planting seeds. I was just being part of this bigger process that was happening through me, witnessing myself, but not attached. And then as those things happen, right, when you detach and you're not controlling it, in a way. It was flowing through you. The following day, this friend of mine called me up and said, oh, you know, I've been thinking about what you said to me. And it's like those seeds have been planted and they started to germinate and they started to create a transformation in this person. But I wasn't trying to control that. It would just happen as a result of this kind of magical process of flowing through something, which I would call maybe truth, with non-attachment. And I got to witness all that happening with myself being the actor of that act, if you like. Thank you.
Yeah, that brings up a couple of good points. One is one of the qualities of self-remembering is being in the flow and feeling like you're being flowed, like you're literally being flowed. And the other thing is the quality of time and how you say to plant a seed. Well, one of the things about planting a seed is going to imply that you're going to have an attention span that goes way bigger than this present moment and includes a present moment that could be a day, a week, a month, depends on how long it takes for that seed to germinate and to grow and to produce, whatever fruit it's going to produce. So, and I wanted to go on that a little bit more, is that as you start to deepen your capacity to be present in the now, then the name I gave, my name for this life code, gene key, human design gate, I Ching hexagram, all the same, just different ways of seeing it. They all mean the same thing. So my way of seeing it is opening present moment. So you're beginning to open the present moment. You're beginning to realize that your intent can function in different time spaces, different time durations. Especially, and we usually get to it just in the way you were describing, where you start to get intimately connected with another person through conversation, and you realize that seeds can be planted. That's all I'm doing. That's all I'm constantly doing is planting seeds. That's all I'm doing all the time is planting seeds, because it's just, yeah, that's an interesting. That's very interesting way of seeing it too. Planting seeds, because those are those are the essence. The seed is always the essence, and it's out of the essence can grow this beautiful, giant plant or whatever. Actually, when it comes to planting a seed in the way we're talking about it, a beautiful life experience, that can have many branches out and can touch many people in different ways. And that takes time. Yeah, that takes time to move, to communicate from one person to the next person over days and certain ideas. And then the ideas connect through actions, and the actions create results and bring in other people, et cetera, et cetera. And eventually you come to possibly what your intent is. So intent is very connected with how flexible and how open time is, and how you can literally, if you can stretch out your vision to see something and then put your intent to it, then you begin the process of it manifesting, as long as you can continue to hold that space. And I'm not even saying that it will happen in this lifetime. It may be in a higher dimension after you leave here, because it can't happen here the way you want it to, but it can always happen. So that's the beauty of it. I'm starting to slip into where we're going next, but we're still in the gift, because that is part of the gift too, is to start to open up and see how you can be present in bigger ways, in bigger, it takes it takes more of your soul to be present to a larger span of time with your intent in order to create an impact in the world, that especially if you want it to be a positive one. That always takes time, takes more time. Yeah. Go, Sarah.
So for me, the gift was that I just released all of that I just told you about. And then I find out that we rescued, while doing some activism, we rescued a box of kittens that this girl was trying to sell. But I also went to get her mom the next day and drive her to the foster, but now I'm finding out that my friend's ex is going to adopt the mother kitten. I mean, the mother cat, who's only like a year old anyway. So I'm very happy because I've always wanted to make sure that the mama cat goes to a good home because she was separated from her kittens in the first place. And all the kittens were adopted. Of course, everybody wants to adopt kittens, but she's real young and cute too. So I'm real happy. I feel like that's the gift of me finding out, you know, I wouldn't say it's just bad news. It's pretty much like really bad news, because when you find out that your whole source of income is going to be cut off and you count on that for the next 5 years, that's kind of like a big thing where I'm still in shock from it. I'm still not even like, I don't even really want to realize it or grasp it. So I've been doing other things to divert myself, or whatever you want to call it, just keep myself busy without thinking about, oh my God, this is like my multi-million-dollar business just basically became worth zero. So I'm screwed. But saved some cats and some kittens, so I'm pretty happy about that. So that's the upside.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool how in all that just the fact that you can find a silver lining in all that is, I think, pretty awesome. That because the whole thing about, again, time and kittens and the lifespan of animals and giving them the chance to experience that lifespan, and that requires a certain intent, because you have to take care of them, and you have to be loving to them, you have to be present to them. And animals are one of the most incredible ways, by the way, that we can remember ourselves in ways, because they mirror stuff to us that we humans can't mirror to each other, because we're not animals. So they show us, they bring in a whole nother way of remembering ourselves. And if you really tune into animals, you can tune into remembering yourself in ways that, yeah, it depends on the animal, but I used to do, I did it, I didn't even realize I did it when I was a kid. And I don't support zoos at all, total speciesist stuff and all that, not into it. But when I was a kid and I went to zoos before I knew any of this, and I was innocent or ignorant, whatever, I used to, with every animal I would see in the zoo, I'd always stand there and be still until they would tune into me, and then I would stay still with them, and I would always wait to see how they felt, what their energy was like. And I would do it with every different kind of animal, and every time it was different, and it was almost like on an energetic level, like a kid in a candy store, because the energies were so incredibly unique and different and unusual, and for a kid, like, young kid, it was intriguing, and I don't even, so many things like this you don't remember, but there's so much of our essence back there in childhood that gets shut down, that we forget about, and a lot of the gift spaces we go into, a lot of times we do it with our shadow and go, oh, I was shut down here and there, but then there's also other parts of us as children where the gifts survive somehow. Maybe we just kind of, once everything got layered on top of it and conditioned, we just kind of forgot about it. But once we open up again, we see there's some parts of us that survived and didn't really get conditioned, and can show us really neat things if we can remember them. And so that's just in a way to tap into what some of the implications of what Sarah just shared, and the joy animals can bring on so many levels. And they can also take us completely out of that whole shadow aspect of being present just to the material world. Oh my God, and all the worries and everything I got to do to make my life work. Oh no, that kind of thing. And just come into the, yeah. Animals are always in the present, that's for sure. Even if they're only capable of surface perceptions, but they're not, because they can read your intent. I don't know if you ever noticed animals. You can think you're going to go and do something. If you had an animal around a long time, they really know you. They'll go right there before you even get there. Just in the minute you think about it, they'll go there. And so they do more than just the surface. So really, it's worth it to really tap into animals. They have so much intelligence, and they can turn us on to so many things about ourselves. And that's some of the side of the whole vegan activism that I think also we do. Yeah, I mean, it's obvious we have to save the ones that are suffering, but also the ones just, I mean, it's just, I guess if nothing else, even when we're doing vigils and seeing them being taken to slaughter, if we can tap into them in that way, maybe for a moment they can feel like another being was, what, acknowledge their presence at least once as a being instead of a commodity or whatever, And I think that's a really sacred thing about vigils and those kind of things. I mean, at least that's what I discovered in vigils, is to just really be present for the animals as beings. Okay.
I guess I'll share an experience I've had with some animals recently, where I have a friend who she lives with one other roommate, and her roommate has a dog, a new puppy, about like 2 months old, like a very energetic young puppy, and her owner is away at work quite a lot, and so her roommate, my friend, has been kind of stuck spending time with this puppy, and I've been spending time over there, and it's been really nice being able to be around this puppy, and but it's been kind of difficult for me, like emotionally, because I've been watching as this puppy's learning how not to bite, where not to go to the bathroom, and my friend has to, she'll like smack her hand close to him to spook him, just to when he'll bite. So he is starting to associate that that's not okay, and I have these like conflicting emotions over the just aggressiveness that we as humans have to express to our animals in order to train them, or I'm not sure if we have to, but how we all feel compelled to when we're told how to train a dog. We have to be kind of rough with them. But I was like feeling all these feelings inside me, and I kind of went back into that like remembering space of where I'm kind of just watching these feelings arise in me as I'm watching the dog go through its experience and my friend go through hers. And something about taking that self-remembering place and going back to that observation room that allows me to, I feel like I can see the situations clearer and the intentions become clear as well. And things just go, I don't know, it feels like things become a lot clearer, and I kind of realized where my discomfort was like coming from, and how the whole situation just had a lot of frustration packed in it, where this dog is with a species that he wasn't born to be around, and this girl is dealing with a creature that she doesn't have the biological presets to just automatically know how to handle. And just realizing that this whole situation of keeping a pet, it's just like the idea of, oh, let's get a dog and we'll have him around for dinner time to entertain us, but during the day he'll just be locked up at home. Like all of these kind of issues just become clear from that position of just like remembering, I suppose, and from there it becomes a lot easier to respond to things, and I don't find myself wrapping my own unconscious intentions into this already convoluted soup of like superficial issues. That's what I had to share.
Thanks, Evan. That also gave a lot of other threads to opening up this gift Yeah, we can move into the Siddha now. Melissa has to leave in 10 minutes. And I'm okay if it becomes a little bit, I mean, we'll see how it goes. If it's a shorter meeting tonight, that's okay too. Because it's this particular life code is in a sense pretty simple because it's all about being present, but it's like being present to what? And as what? And as a result, what does that take you into? So as we move into the Siddha, and when I talk about absolute witnessing, for me that that's it's like at a certain point when you're in self-remembering, and when I say you, I mean me. I would fall into a space that felt like it. There would be moments when I'd be incredibly lucid and have the capacity to really stay with the thread of self-remembering and follow it deeper inside myself. And I would literally not. It wasn't a falling, but it almost felt like a slowly descending but opening kind of experience of entering into a much bigger space of awareness, that that the room I was in experiencing that was just like almost you could literally see the surface as a surface of something much deeper, if I can describe it that way. And as you settle into that space, you kind of feel like your presence becomes like the space of everything. And it just happens to be coalescing and crystallizing through you in a visible form in the room you're in. But everything becomes like translucent, and you can literally see that everything is like just how to say it, condensed is the word I want to say, super condensed light. And these are just perceptions as I'm tapping into this deeper space. It's kind of more like an objective state of consciousness. And by objective, I mean objective to everything I'm experiencing, including other subjects, life forms, whatever. And it sort of starts to become the identity of everything. The identity of everything becomes this one awareness, this deep clarity. It becomes a deep clarity and an energy expression. I'm thinking, I'm in a space and there's animals and they're moving, but everything is the same. Even though what I mean by the same is it's all this presence of awareness, and everything has a different way of being able to be expressed as this central awareness. And there's a sense of super lightness, like there's no weight to anything. And as I say, transparent, translucent, it actually becomes almost transparent. And the material world is almost like these veils hanging over the edge. Everything has an edge to it that contains this central awareness. Yeah, and it's like you lose your sense of separateness, separate identity, but at the same time you become super defined as an awareness. Awareness becomes super clear, super defined, super present, super singularized, but at the same time you're not caught up in your, and even though you don't stop being your identity, you're not identified with that. So you're free to experience this presence without any limitation. So that's the way I'll open the Siddha. That's how I describe when I enter into the absolute witnessing space, because it's absolute. It's everything, and it's all a witnessing awareness. Everything just becomes a play of that. So Melissa, I know you have to go soon. If you wanted to spend a few minutes, I don't mean to push you, but just because you get some space before you go.
Thanks, Dharmendra. Well, it's funny you're talking about this because I really had this experience this morning. I'm running a printmaking class with children, and we're working on looking at trees and at flowers. And today we were going to look at flowers and mandalas that are generated from flowers. So I went out into the garden and I cut some daisies from the garden, and they're quite big and wild. And, you know, I've always looked at daisies in the field, but I never looked at daisies, you know, in that other sense. And so I got the daisy. Actually, I'll bring it over because it's quite spectacular. Sorry, just take a second. So here's my daisy. And I'm going to bring it real close so you can see in the eye of the daisy. And I fell into the space here. I'm going to just say it like that. I fell into the space and I connected with this being here through this space. And it was like a portal for me this morning. And it like transported me into this whole other world that what I could feel was a sense of joy. It's just joy and giddiness and just this incredible creation of the world that's based on this spiral. And but at the same time, this spiral for me was like a tunnel, a time tunnel or something where I could travel. I know it sounds really bizarre, but it's like there was no separation, and it was almost like the flower and I were communicating, but it was being done through pattern, through this form. And that took me just to a really joyful and elated space where I was fully present in myself, but I lost myself in this experience at the same time with this flower. Thank you.
And I think that's a very beautiful description also of what I would call that absolute witnessing presence all of a sudden is also capable of opening a present moment inside a place you wouldn't expect it to be even. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a vastness. It just has to be a window into a whole new dimension. And that's like that's a very beautiful other way of experiencing this Siddha. Absolutely. And just the way you described it too, about being lost and found at the same time. That's definitely a part of, yeah, totally. That's a nice way of describing it also. Yes, Sarah, you had your hand up. And thank you, Melissa.
I was just going to add that, speaking of new dimensions, yeah, so that was really the struggle I was having, was moving from the materialistic world, that dimension, and then being in the vegan world where I don't have to be consuming or, you know, being in that materialistic mode. And so I thought, oh, this will be great, you know. So that's where my struggle is I thought I was going to be able to stay in this, which I'm going to need to obviously adapt, because really I think the word for 2020 should be adaptation, because we really need to learn how to adapt, because the past is the past. We can't go back. And now I have to say, well, the materialistic world is the past, and I have to learn how to adapt in this new dimension of what's going to be eventually come the gift economy, right?
Yeah, and that kind of also is how should I say? That's a good way of seeing how the space that we've been talking about, you know, touch and becomes like the determining condition of, you know, what we have to experience. So we're going from a way of exchanging resources that we've been used to a whole new way of doing it. So that, I think, is also part of what we're going to have to definitely be present in a new way. And anything, and so that is definitely what I guess I would say that's how the Siddha moves through the gift. It's like if we can tap into that space and trust that it's a gift we're being given to learn a more savvy, more sophisticated, more evolved, more refined way of sharing resources together, because that's really what it's doing. And we're just not used to it. So it's freaky, and we haven't figured it out yet. But on the other hand, it's it's where we got to go. So the quicker we can release any, I guess, distrust about it, because it's not like we're going to figure it out, and we can't just flow with it. We actually have to get into it and create it and mold it out of, the reality we're in. So that's a challenging part of it. But that's what I get of Sarah. So definitely, that's true. The whole gift economy, and how it's going to permeate the presence of this world everywhere as our new mode of exchange.
For me, this whole experience of presence, I would say the first time I felt this experience of presence, uh, I would say if you that that experience you have when you wake up in the middle of the night and your arm is asleep, and you look over like at your arm, and it doesn't feel like your arm is there, but you see your arm, but it feels like it's not there. This experience of presence, when I first experienced it, it feels like oh, none of this is here, but I don't know. It's like I guess it's like maybe I'm muddling this feeling of like emptiness with the feeling of presence. But there's something about the feeling of presence of where it just feels like very, very vast. It feels like you're being suspended in something, and there's no edges. There's no limits to it. It's like a there's just this omnipresent flower that that you can zoom in on and zoom out on, and it's just like it's something that would grow and shrink for you if you gave it the attention. I don't know. I get this feeling of it's just like of being held, and I don't know. My response to it is usually just like with silence, I guess, because for me, when I feel truly present, I feel like the silence kind of speaks to it, and I don't know. But out of that presence, so many other things just become clear and obvious. The idea of harming another person senselessly just becomes like so obviously wrong. It looks like, because you realize it's like we're all part of the same fabric, and it's just so counterintuitive and not constructive for us to be tearing at one another when it becomes so obvious how interconnected we are. And yeah, I think from that place of presence, the way of the future seems to become ever more clear for me.
Yeah, really well spoken. So much becomes clear in that presence. That's for sure. Yeah, and everything makes so much more sense because everything really isn't anything other than that presence. And once we are tuned into that presence, whether it's a new mode of exchange or whatever it is, however it's coming into our life, because it comes from every dimension. So it doesn't matter what it is, it comes from everywhere, and it's always new, and it's always there to teach us something, to stretch us, to challenge us, to become more of what we are, you know. And also once everything is kind of like, once everything is realized that that is the essence of everything, it's like then everything starts to make sense in a really not the usual way of making sense. It makes sense because everything is what it's supposed to be, and you just get it as it's being it. That, oh yeah, and and it's not like you're lost in that, you know, that phenomenal drag of the mind that catches it about a minute after or a second after and tries to put it together what happened. You're in the moment with it, so you're getting what it is as it's happening. So the answer is already there, and out of that, you know, like spontaneous responses and new creations just come effortlessly, because then all of a sudden you realize you're that too, and so anything's possible. Anything can come out of that. Any kind of action can come out of that. What I'm doing is taking that Siddha and tying it back into everyday life, and the fact that that's how it weaves its way and creates our culture and our arts and our sciences, and everything brilliant in our life has evolved out of that, through tapping into nature and then letting nature take us into where nature's tapped into, and then allowing all that to come back into us as action, that we become one of the most beautiful parts of nature that can bring that presence into the world. And you know, it always does something. It always relieves a suffering, or answers a question, or invents something that's needed, or breaks through an old pattern and releases a lot of energy and allows something new to occur that needs to move and change. All those things, as we start to tap into what that is in a very ordinary way. And well, that was a quick one tonight, but I'm okay with that. I'm going to stop recording now.